بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Today, our focus is going to be that we're looking at someone from the subcontinent, which is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and those areas, inshallah. So as usually is the case, what we do is we give the setting. So you need to, for us, we need to understand, so we can kind of visualize. We don't have Netflix here, but we could visualize that. What was the state around that time frame that we're looking at of the ummah? And then from there, we can actually better understand. So we're talking about around the 1500s, mid 1500s, 1550. The Mughal emperors are in power. So there's a Mughal empire, and this story takes place within the Mughal empire. Just for you to understand how great or how vast the Mughal empire was, it is mentioned that the rule of Umar radiallahu an, it went from Medina all the way to Sham and Palestine and all those areas. His rule was around 2.2 million square miles, whereas the rule for these people were around 3.2 million square miles. So it was a massive dynasty, right? And this dynasty came into existence in the late 1400s when Ottoman Empire was at its peak, and they had sent somebody by the name of Babur, right? Babur basically means a vicious lion, right? Meow, meow, right? So they sent a lion. His name was Babur, and they sent him over there to establish the Mughal Empire. So the story is not about Mughal Empire, but you need to know that Mughal Empire was there. Now, the person who was in charge of the Mughal Empire at that time was Akbar, right? The Emperor Akbar, very famous. His name was Akbar. And Akbar was known, he was very much like Trudeau. Okay? I'm serious. He was very much like Trudeau, right? So one of the things that Akbar said, all religions are equal. There is no right and wrong. You can follow whatever you want. Everything is going to be okay. As long as you don't want nobody, you're going to be all fine. So that was one of his claims. He said all religions are fine. Questions in the end. Questions in the end. Akbar was a Muslim, but he left the religion of Islam and the practices of religion of Islam, as you will find out right now. So one of the other things he stipulated is he mandated that anybody, when they say Allahu Akbar, in that Allahu Akbar, I am the Akbar. Right? So so people had to believe that when they say Allahu Akbar, he is the Akbar. Allah, and then I am Akbar. So you must believe in that. He also created something at that time. Forcefully, he would force people into doing sajda for other than Allah. Who do we do sajda to? Who? Yes? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we allowed to do sajda to anybody else? No, we cannot do sajda we can't do sajda to anybody. Can you do a sajda to the sadaqah box? No? The blue box? No, we can only do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he did something which was sajda ta'zimi, which means the sajda of respect and honor. How did that work? He created an arch. So think of Abdullah and, or me or anyone, anybody below 5 feet here in height. No. So, and what he did is, like, you're walking into the king, he created an arch, kind of like the arch you have at the back, but it was less than 5 feet. It was like 4.5 feet. So how would a person enter? Like somebody like me, you'd have to go like this and enter. So he would force people to do sajda like that. Those who refused, no problem. You're going to have to enter through an arch and you're going to do sajda to me. Right? This is important. So he mixed between Hindus and Muslims. Everything was, lovey-dovey, kind of like what we have. And he said, we can't slaughter cows. So he banned the slaughter of cows because our Hindu friends are going to get really hurt with that. Right? So he started walking away and very similar to what we're seeing today. Right? People started leaving the belief in the hereafter. What do you mean hereafter? Are we gonna? No, man, we're gonna live once. Live your life, man. You're only gonna live once. Have you heard that? Right? You live it up, man. What's wrong with you? Right? You're only gonna live once. Why you so uptight and religious? Let it go. Right? So he said life after death is nothing, and people accepted all of this, and he changed the faith of the people. Now, the issue that all started was they started having an altered or an adulterated form of a Sufi order, which was Naqshbandī Sufi order, which a lot of people in Pakistan follow today. Pakistan, Turkey, and all of these, they had a Sufi order and they followed, but they went so far away from the practices of Islam and faith that it had almost nothing left of Islam. As one of my sheikhs, he says, we call them Sufi goofies. Right? Sufi goofies. Like, what does that mean? Like, you meet, there are some of these centers here, you drive and you go in there and you're like, oh, so it's like, oh, we love you. Everything is all about love. It's like, oh, what about salah? Oh, there's no such thing. We are just for love. These are called Sufi goofies, okay? So whenever you see something like that, he's like, oh, red alert, Sufi goofy alert, right? So all of them became Sufi goofies. Was that funny? Was that funny? Yeah, she finds it funny. So they became Sufi goofies in a sense that they were just completely off the path. Then what actually happened was, at that time, two movements started. And these movements are important because they have traces of people. You know people that have been affected by these movements in your school. Okay? So the first movement that started was a movement called the Bhakti movement. Right? The Bhakti means Bhagat, and all of this means love, which means we are all for love. And it was started by two people, Ramnand and Ramnuja. Two people, Ramnand and Ramnuja, they started this movement. Then what happened is they had 12 disciples. These people, they had 12 disciples. One of the 12 disciples was Guru Nanak, who was the founder of Sikh religion. Okay, one of the founders was Guru Nanak. Now, Guru Nanak happened to be living in India in the Muslim rule at that time, so-called Muslim rule. That is why it is mentioned that Guru Nanak even went for Hajj. He actually went for Hajj. He tried out Islam. He tried out everything because it was all love, right? Like nothing, there's no right and wrong. You're right. You want to go for Hajj, you go for Hajj, no problem. Wo bhi chalega, no problem. You want to do this and do a puja of an idol, no problem. Everything is good. Right? So this love and it kind of like what we're going through today, right? Like it's all about, like, so what are you talking about right and wrong? There's no right and wrong. It's all like your right, it's your right, my right is my right. We're all right. Right? Until we're not. And then the second movement that started was called Sulh-e-Kull, which means we will have peace with everyone. We are not at odds. We are not at peace with everyone. So we're not going to say you are wrong. We're not going to say we're going to love you, but more importantly, we're just going to live with peace with you. So you cannot tell me what's wrong. You cannot tell me what's right. I will love you for being a human being. Who cares about your religion? Kind of sounds familiar, right? Very familiar to what we're going through. And then Akbar, yes. Your teacher said that? You can't dress up for Halloween? Good teacher. Most teachers don't say that. Oh, you can't dress up like a different religion. Okay, cool. So Akbar was not done with messing up with religion of Islam. So he said, you know what, I'm going to create something new. It was called Din-i Akbari or Din-i Ilahi. The Deen of Akbar or the Deen of Ilah. And he needed some sheikh to stamp, this is haqq. He needed some Quran and Sunnah and ayat. So they had two scholars on payroll at that time, Abdul Fazl and Faizi. Two scholars who were the grand muftis or government muftis at that time, and they said whatever. For example, Akbar is like, I want to marry more than 4 women. No problem, we'll get you Quran and verses and we'll get you all the evidences that you can do whatever you want. Right? So anything you wanted. They will go back and they will figure and turn and twist the words of Rasulullah and Quran to make a point. Okay? Very similar to what's happening today in our world, right? Then another thing that he focused on, this is a very scary thing and we need to be careful about. A belief, I mean, a lot of people follow it today, but you never know, it can come back. With the way we're going and the world is going, it's very soon, it should, it will make a reappearance now, which is called wahdatul wujud, right? So it's a very long philosophical discussion and I intend to bore all of you with it. Not. Okay? Simple, the creation and creator are one. It's a false belief, which means if you look at the creation, you will find the creator in the creation, right? So he came, so this was what was the prevalent belief. This was started by somebody called Ibn al-Arabi, he's the guy you find in the Ertugrul series, if you've ever seen that. Ibn Arabi, the same Ibn Arabi had that belief, and again, what led to him, that's a completely different discussion, was it right and wrong and what were his words, and then they'll say you can understand his words. For an average layman, when you say you will find Allah in the tree, they get confused. They're like, what do you mean? Allah is in the tree, so I should just worship the tree, right? And that's what started happening. People started worshiping things with this belief. So now you understand this is the era we're living in. Now comes our hero of the time. So you keep this in mind. As I'm telling you this story, it is important for you to have this background. It's a very short background of 100 years in 10 minutes, but you will understand. So a brief history. Shaykh Ahmad Saleem, the one we're talking about today, is Shaykh Ahmad Saleem. Okay? And basically, he was born on June 26th, 1564, in a small area in Sirhind in East Punjab. Okay? Ahmad Sirhindī, that was his name. His actual full name was Abul Barakat Badruddin Ahmad, the father of Barakat, and Badruddin, the moon of the deen of Allah, the light of the deen of Allah, Ahmad. And Ahmad Sirhindī because he was born in the place Sirhind. He has two main titles that are known by, if you ever read up books. I was actually, just right before you guys came in, I was reading a PhD thesis that was written in Oxford by a person on him, his beliefs and stuff like that. So he was very influential. So much material. McGill University has PhDs written on him. His influence was phenomenal. So he starts off and, his two names are Imam Rabbani, right? For example, you have Sahih al-Bukhari, right? So, Sahih al-Bukhari, but, do you have different names? Abu Bakr, for example, right? His name is Abu Bakr, but that's not his real name. What's his real name? That's a homework for you guys. What's the real name of Abu Bakr? What's your name? That's a hint. It's a hint. You can go look him up. Okay? So, he had a name, Imam Rabbani, and the second name was Mujaddid al-Thani. Now, Mujaddid means what? The reviver. Somebody who revives. Al-Thani means the second millennium, i.e. after the 1,000 years of the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was born in 980, 990 Hijri, around that time, right when we were about to enter into the second millennia of the Hijri calendar. Question? You have a question at the back? Or you have a stretch? Stretching. All right, stretching is good. Stretching is good. Now, his education, you have a question? Abdullah ibn something, yes. That's a really good name, Abdullah ibn something, right? There's Abdullah ibn something, there's Abdullah ibn everything, there's Abdullah ibn nothing. These are all really good names. Yes. So, his education, where did he get his education? He learned to read, he read and learned Quran from his father. So his primary education was from his father. Then he went to a place in Pakistan, modern day Pakistan, called Sialkot. Okay, Sialkot. What is Sialkot? For those of you that are from Pakistan, what is Sialkot known for in the world today? Leather goods, yes. Sports goods and leather goods. All the footballs that are used in the World Cup are made in, Soccer World Cup are made in Sialkot. Right? It is known for, it is the top exporter of leather goods around the world. So very high quality leather, factories upon factories and tanneries upon tanneries, and lots of sports goods. A lot of these companies, Adidas and stuff, they've got their primary source of sports equipment coming out of Sialkot. Yes. Oh, you went to a factory in Sialkot? Nice. What did you see? You saw how the footballs were made? Nice. And the cricket bats? Okay, nice, mashallah. So he went to Sialkot and he learned under a sheikh of his time at that time, Maulana Yaqub Kashmiri, and he learned hadith and fiqh. So he became a scholar. Around the age of 20, and another narration it mentions that around the age of 18, he was giving fatwas to the public. So he had become a full mufti at the age of 18, and another narration 20. I.e., people were coming to him to ask him about knowledge, matters of deen. That's how knowledgeable he was at that time. And he died in the age on 10th of December 1624. Okay, in the same town of Sirhind. Yes. You do the math. He was born in June. Was he born in June? Yeah, June 26th, 1564. And he died in 1624. So how old do you think he was? Who can do that? 1564, and he died in, almost 70, yeah. So, next part. So what were some of the challenges that he faced at that time? And I'm telling you this because a lot of you are going to face the following challenges. So his challenges of his time and the challenges that we face today are very similar. That's why I think his story, and if you have time, there's a lot of English books written. You can find books on Amazon that are written on him. Make sure you pick up books that are written by Muslim authors, because a lot of the Orientalists that wrote books upon him, they made some wrong conclusions and they're not very authentic because they're trying to convolute the historical viewpoints for Muslims. So pick up a book. If you want a reference and stuff, I can give you a few. So his fundamental challenge was, how do you reform a religion when people have walked away from so far from deen? People are doing, sajda to human beings. People don't believe in akhirat. People have started, this whole emphasis on. If you're from Pakistan and stuff like that, and even certain parts of Africa, like when I was in Ethiopia and all these countries, you find that this belief of these are highly spiritual people and they can do these supernatural things, karamat, right? I can do karamat, $100, it'll come right from my hand, right? These type of things, right? People started believing in it so much that you had a lot of Sufi goofies doing these goofy stuff, and people were paying for it. People were coming. I mean, you have this today's day and age. I mean, having said that, we as Muslims, we believe in that. We believe that, it's part of our tenet of faith as a Sunni Muslim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can choose any of his pious person and have something supernatural happen on his hand, but it's by the choice and will of Allah. The problem with these Sufi Goofy karamat are like they're doing it at will, right? That's the main issue. It's not at will. It's by the will of Allah. If He decides, then it can happen. Okay, so we don't deny that. It's part of our faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala something can happen supernatural. And we see this all the time, right? We see this all the time. Car accident happens, the car is fully crumbled, the guy comes out without a scratch. Right? What just happened? According to all the scientific facts and according to the physics and everything, there was no possibility for this human being to survive. Just recently, my wife told me, like, one of her, somebody that she knows, they had a heart attack and their heart stopped for 1 hour and 30 minutes. And then it came back. Yeah, and it came back. Right? It came back. So, and this is, that person passed away later. He was survived. He went to the hospital, but subhanAllah, he passed away, I think, a couple of days ago. But it's amazing. Like, doctor was like, how? The heart had stopped for almost 1 hour and 30 minutes. How did it come back? Right? Things happen. So supernatural things can happen. That's part of our beliefs. But believing that if a supernatural thing happened and if miraculously, what is your name? What's your name? Huh? Alina. So if you know, Alina is sitting and she does this one hand, and right next to Husna is this blue box of sadaqah, and then this starts flying, and then the sadaqah box opens, and then the money starts floating. And if she does something like that, right, what would happen to you guys? You'd be like, you know, she's a saint, right? We need to all worship her, right? That's if you didn't have the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what people started doing, right? So they would do some supernatural stuff, and the people are like, oh, this is the guy I need to connect to. Khalas, I am not going to worship anymore. The second issue that he faced at that time was that this whole concept that I explained to you, wahdatul wujud, the issue that their aqidas were completely messed up. They started believing in things that, you know, Allah is found in every single thing. The third thing that is happening is focusing. So the Hindus and the Muslims, they started intermingling so much, kind of like what is happening today to us, Muslims and non-Muslims, because we live in this society. There is almost this assimilation into this country and the society. And again, Muslims have no problem assimilating, but we need to have spaces where we stick to one another as Muslims. Environments like these. Very, very important for us to keep our identities alive. And one of his biggest challenges was, how do I separate the two? Because now people don't see Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, they don't see them as separate entities. Everybody is seen as one. So he started a reform movement where he brought this idea of the two-nation theory, which is Muslims are a nation. Irrespective of what language we speak in India, because India has more than 222 languages, despite whatever the languages we speak in that India, Pakistan, and that region, in Bangladesh, we are a nation because we're Muslims, right? And that is very important for us as Muslims to live here. When you're in high school and you see a Muslim, no matter what happens, right? You may be really good friends with somebody who's a non-Muslim, but that Muslim is 1,000 times better in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than your best friend who happens to be a non-Muslim. Why? Because we are one nation and that other person is not. That does not mean you disrespect that person. That does not mean you show hate towards that person. But we have to be very careful. Many times when we go through, you know, with my children, when we go through the Quran and stuff like that, so many times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning us from taking friends who are not Muslims. Like, almost every juz, every 2-3 days when we're reciting Quran, there's a verse that comes, don't take friends, don't take friends, don't take friends. There's a reason for that, right? Because we are a nation. On the other hand, we should, especially in Canada, the thing that unites us all, we all come from different backgrounds, is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And that's what he had to do. So he said, I'm going to separate and I'm going to present this two-nation theories that Muslims are a nation. That was the seed of Pakistan. That ideology of the two nations, that Muslims are a nation and others are from different, so we are a nation. That led to further down the road, Alamgir and that philosophical onslaught. And then, you know, Sir, what's his name? The one who started the Aligarh University? Sir Sayyid Ahmad, right? Sir Sayyid Ahmad, he took that idea and then he formulated it. But where was the root of this ideology it came from? It came from that fact that when you know, Sir Ahmad Sirhindī, he saw that when we do not, as Muslims living in non-Muslim lands, if we do not behave like one nation, we will be eaten up by that nation. Right? So it's very important to have good Muslim friends in school. Right? And I always tell people, I spoke about this in my khutbah today, I always tell people that, you know, when you're looking for a friend, you choose, like you're at 7, 6 or 7, nobody can say I'm, you know, mashallah, alhamdulillah, out of 10, I'm I think 12 in my religion. Right? If you see that, Sufi Goofy. Right? You have to run away from that person, right? Only they can say that, right? Because they don't have religion, they're not following. But all of us, we need to get better in our religion. So you befriend the one who you think is at 10. That should be your friend. And you less those friends who are at 1 and 2. And we all know that we have friends that, you know, I'm here and you're like, oh man, this guy's like way far, right? Like he's gone too far. And we know those that are like, oh, this guy's too uptight and too conservative. That is your savior. The other one is going to take you somewhere that you don't want to go. Okay. Then a very interesting. Are you guys getting this? Are you getting it? Yes, maybe. Alina, is that your name? Alina, are you getting it? She's the youngest, right? How old are you? 5. Where's our 6? We have a 6-year-old too. Where is Hassan? Is here? He just left. Okay. So we have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all age groups, mashallah. 7, yes, mashallah. Now this is a really powerful incident that happens, and I want everybody to pay attention to this. So what happens is, Akbar dies, and Ahmad Sirhindī, Shaykh Ahmad Saleem, Mujaddid al-Thani, he is not liked by people in the society. Okay, nobody likes him. Literally nobody likes him, because he's raising concerns about what is happening to the Muslim Ummah. So one thing we all should learn away, that when we start reforming, even when we start reforming and fixing our lives, when we start fixing other people's lives, there are going to be people who are not going to like you. That's the part and parcel of this, right? Because you're getting closer to Allah, and shaitan does not want you to get closer to Allah. So shaitan attacks you from your closest friends and families. And when you fear that you're going to lose them, you say, you know what, it's okay, I can sacrifice getting closer to Allah. I can just be close to. So he had no friends. And a very interesting incident happened. Again, so he wrote a letter, right? And I'm going to come to his books, and it's very important, and we're going to talk about some of his books. So he wrote a letter, and most of his reform was through letters, okay? He wrote over 536 letters to 192 people. Okay? And these letters, as you know, were not like letters of a nature, you know, I ate a burger today and I went and have fries and then we had Dairy Queen, I'll meet you tomorrow, we'll go tomorrow. Instagram updates, it was nothing like that. These were letters that talked about some heavy stuff. So he wrote a letter to the king of that time, Jahangir. Akbar had died and Jahangir had taken over. So he wrote a letter, and in that letter he actually washed him like properly. He's like, what is wrong with you? You are a person, 1, 2, 3. I mean, they're younger kids here. I'm not going to say a few things, but you know, his tone was very harsh. Okay, right? He's like, you don't even deserve to live. Like, those were the words. Guess what happened? They're like, oh, we need this Mujaddid. Call him. So when they called him, Abdul Fadl and Maulana Abdul Fadl and Maulana Faizi, who were part of the muftis of that time, they said, we are not going to, they said, there is no way that Ahmad Sirhindī is going to enter your palace, and this arch that you have built, he is going to do sajda through it. We have to decrease the height of arch, so we have to force him to do sajda. So what happened is, he said, if he doesn't, then we will have more than 50 palwan, you know, people who are wrestlers, 50 wrestlers. They will be on standby. And they will be ready to force his head down to do sajda to Jahangir. Okay? So he enters. How does he enter? Anybody knows the story? Huh? No. He enters with, so imagine this is the arch. What's that? Again, this is more cultural, but you know, some of you would know that. There's a Mexican dance where they have the stick and then it goes keep doing, like, what is it called? What is it called? Limbo? Yeah, and then they keep lowering the stick, right? Like, is it called limbo? Limbo. Yeah, see, I know about it, I don't know what it is, right? So that's good. So kind of like that, you know how you have to like bend over and then your legs go first, and then you can't go like this, you have to go like backwards. So he said, if I'm going to enter, my legs are going to be the first thing that are going to enter. So he entered his legs and he went backwards and then he entered. So these people that came, they were like, you know, the wrestlers. Jahangir ordered, and he said, you're going to take his neck and you're going to force him down. This is where we believe in the karamat. We said, you know, the karamat of awliya is something that is part of our belief, but they have to be religious, they must follow the Sharia. They can't just be, not praying. Like I met one person, like I was invited at nikah, and after the nikah I saw these the religious people. They were all wearing the topis and stuff and green whatever, and they were all dressed like me, right? And they're sitting, and Maghrib Salah happened and none of them got up to pray. So one of the uncles, he said, you must have prayed, you should pray. He's like, oh, I prayed in Medina. I was like, Sufi Gufis, right? So I remember that, Sufi Gufis, right? So I'm like, what? They prayed in Medina? And the other one's like, I was in Makkah actually. So the true story, this is in Canada, right? So these are the people that are still there. That's not a karamat, right? This was. So 50 people trying to force his neck down, and Allah protected him. And they couldn't. 50 men that were trying to hold him down. And he said, this head of mine will only prostrate in front of you if my Allah wills. It will either prostrate to Allah or it will be chopped off from this body. There's no second option. Okay? So this tells us what? That many times we have to take a stance against tyrants, stance against what is morally wrong. And sometimes it will be difficult, but Allah's help is going to come to us. So he refused to do that. Jahangir threw him into the prison. Now what happened in the prison? He didn't stop his whole process of writing letters. He kept writing letters even through the prison. Right? So I said he wrote 292 influential Muslims of that time. His letters were written to 192 influential Muslims of that time. Now, what happened after this? Yes. So, they didn't, he was a scholar too, so obviously they didn't imprison him in a sense that they shackled him and stuff like that. They gave him respect in the prison because they knew that he was a scholar. So they had adab, and they had, not like the prisons of Noyan and all of the other things that okay? So it's not like that. So they imprisoned him, he was writing letters through the prison, and 1 year later, Jahangir realizes that, okay, I've done a big mistake. He was very remorseful. And he says, I'm going to bring Sir Ahmad Hindi back. Then he paid him a handsome amount of money. And he said, I'm sorry for what I've done to you. And as a matter of fact, I want you to become my advisor. And that's what Shaykh Ahmad Sirhindī wanted. Right? So all of his 50 years of effort, 60 years, I've actually summarized the whole 50 years in 20 minutes. Right? But all of that effort came down to that moment where he became an advisor to Jahangir, and then he started working on the fixing the system, the political. I'm not even going into that, like how he reformed the political system. He created the 3 pillars of the Islamic political system, which was then later used by Malaysia, Indonesia to establish their political empires. So again, it's a very big story. I'm trying to summarize it, but again, he became very instrumental in reforming. Now, the most beautiful part of this entire story is not this. It is that almost 100 years later, there's another person that comes by the name of Alamgir, right? So, Jahangir dies. So, Alamgir is born in 1699 and Jahangir dies in 1620, 1630. So 70 years, and then Alamgir eventually reigns, if he becomes 20 years of age or 30, he gets power. He actually gets power earlier. So Alamgir and his advisors were people who were the disciples, as people who were following the Sufi, the corrected Sufi order of Naqshbandī, and with fiqh and knowledge and sharia, they came down, and then when they came down, they started influencing Alamgir, and then Alamgir, he set forth an entire body of 500 scholars, and he gathered them together, and he said, we need to create one copy of this fatwa, this reference that people and ulama of the entire subcontinent, that entire region of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, all of this combined, they are going to use that one fatwa as the primary source of guidance. What is that fatwa called? Fatawa Alamgiriya, by his name, Fatawa Alamgiri. Today, that fatwa is published in English and translated, portions of it, not entirely, and it's published in other many languages, Persian, Urdu and stuff like that. It's still available. It's like 12, 13 volumes. What's really sad is I witnessed with my own eyes an event where Dr. Idris, who's the resident scholar here, he used to pray in a particular masjid, and in that particular masjid was this fatwa book. And that masjid had taken on the ideology, the extreme ideology of, denying the existence of any, the four schools of thought, and they had gone into an extreme ideology. And they were still, practicing that. And as part of cleansing their library, right, they found this Fatawa Alamgiri. I still remember it was a red and white book. It was 13, 14 volumes. And I remember my father-in-law, he said, "Don't throw this away, give it to me." And they said, "We'd rather throw this in the garbage than have you misguided from it." Right? And sad reality was these were the people who were from India and Pakistan. Right? And that's what happens when you are so ignorant about your own history, that this is the book why you're a Muslim today. Right? You just don't know. Right? You're so ignorant and lost in your own philosophy and whatever you believe in, that you don't know that your parents and forefathers are Muslims thanks to this person and that one particular book. Right? And this is something I witnessed. Like if somebody else has witnessed it, so we were there in the masjid when this happened. And it's a masjid in Mississauga. Right? So it's so sad that people just, when you disconnect from your faith and religion, and specifically in history, you don't realize the value of things that you have. And so he wrote that book, Fatawa Alamgiri. In that was a particular, from the 500 scholars, there was a scholar by the name of Mullah Nizamuddin. Now, Mullah Nizamuddin was also given the charge of writing a curriculum that could be taught to the masses, but it could also be taught to the school systems, the dini school systems, the madrasa system that exists today. And because of that, if you ever go to, and even parts of Africa, there are parts of Sudan, there are parts of Somalia, they still use the Dars-e Nizami. That word Dars-e Nizami actually comes from that Alamgir's council, one alim who actually wrote the syllabus. And that syllabus is an 8-year syllabus for somebody to become a master of Islamic sciences and at least a good imam. And that Dars-e Nizami came. And today, all of these different facts, where in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, you have the Ahl Hadith, you have the Deobandi, you have the Barelvi, no matter what segment, they all attribute, they've made some changes to that curriculum, but all of that, the roots of it go back to this effort. And the roots of all of this Alamgir's effort go back to Sir Ahmad Hindi and his reform, which eventually 100 years later came into fruition that we saw. Now, some of his books, his most famous book is called Maktubat. Maktub means something written, and he had written those maktubats. Those maktubats are basically that is found in 3 volumes. You can get them in one volume too. The first volume is called Darul Ma'arif, right? The house of awareness. And the book it has 313 letters that he wrote to different people, which primarily talk about awareness, your awareness and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will have ma'arifa, you will get to know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with those 313. Why do you think there are 313? What is it? It is connected to what? Badr. Yes, Battle of Badr. 313 related to the Battle of Badr. Then there are 99 letters. Imagine these, like for the younger people and for all of us, these are his status updates. Right? When we write Instagram, Twitter, status updates, these are his status updates. There was no other way of, letting the other person know what I'm thinking other than writing a letter and sending it to them. Right? Then he had 99 letters that are written in there, which was called Nurul Khalaiq. It's the light for the creation. Why 99? Why 99? 99 names of Allah, right? 99 names of Allah, and names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are a source of light for all of us. So he made that 99. And there are 114 letters that he wrote that are called Ma'rifatul Haqa'iq, right? Which is the awareness or the knowing of quiddity, or ma'arif, things that must be known. Haqa'iq, things that the way they should be. So knowing how things should be known. Okay? And there were 114. It's connected to what? The Quran, 114 surahs of the Quran, right? And these are all compiled in that. Now, in all these letters that he wrote, he overall used over 300 verses in those letters, and 370 verses from the Quran, and 300 Sahih Hadith from Bukhari, Muslim, and all the Sihah Sitta. Now, the first letter he writes, because he recognized that the society had mingled, everybody had started living together, there was no right and wrong, as I had mentioned. Now this is where you're going to benefit from the intro that I did, right? All of that, what do you think was the primary cause of their dissonance from the religion? Why were people away from the religion? The historical background that I gave you. What do you think was this one thing that they forgot that was important for them to know? Make a guess. What do you think is very important? What was the most significant event in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No. What was the most significant? What changed his life? Yeah, what was the event? Huh? The revelation, wahi. Right? Revelation, the wahi. Right? When you disconnect humanity from this concept that we have a message from Allah, you have an existence of an atheistic society. Atheism is on the rise because they have disconnected that there is no such thing as anything that can come from God to us. So imagine back then, his hikmah, that the first letter he wrote was on atheism. Now, I mean, those of you that read Urdu, you'd be able to actually go and read this. It's filled with, I'm very bad in Urdu. Like I downloaded a PDF to read about his Urdu. I started like halfway. I'm like sitting there and reading. I'm like, you know what, but this pace, like, you know, we'll have to do the lecture in 2 weeks. So then I went to English sources and some Arabic sources and stuff like that. But again, so much about his life has been written in Urdu sources. So if you happen to be a speaker of Urdu and a reader of Urdu, read in that, you'll really benefit. So the first thing he writes is al-wahyu min indillah. Wahi comes from Allah. And this is the only wasita, this is the only connection, only way for you and me to know right and wrong. Society, your teachers, your humanity, your feelings cannot tell you what is right and wrong. It's only Allah and the wahi that tells you what's right and wrong. Then the next thing, he wrote another book, right? He wrote another book which is called Importance of Nubuwah. The importance of nubuwah. It's translated as, it's called Ithbatun Nubuwah. He wrote that book when he was 18 years of age. Okay, if you read that book today, you need another scholar to explain to you what is written in that book, because it's so like deep with logic and philosophy at that time. And he said, Nubuwah is prophethood, and having a messenger is the most important thing that Allah has sent for our protection and perfection of this religion. So if we don't recognize the existence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as being the most important entity in our lives, then we are really far away from our faith. Then the next letter that he wrote, letter number 141. You know, I mean, they're just picking up different things. So in letter number 141, the summary of the letter, he says that those who claim that they follow a particular Sufi order. So he's talking to the people who claim that I follow a Sufi order. He says, the fact that you say that you have prayed in Makkah and Medina is not part of our deen. Deen constitutes is that you follow the way of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So you imagine, like he is somebody from the Sufi order who's actually negating a lot of the practices that are found in the Sufi orders today. Then he says In another letter he says, in life there are only three things that matter. Ilm, knowledge, wa amal bihi, and you act upon it. And if you don't have the third, there's no benefit of the first and the second, ikhlas. You do it for Allah. Not for me, not for you, not for, you practice, you follow a command of Allah, you follow a particular command of Allah, not because you are forced by somebody, not because somebody tells you, not because you're feeling this way or feeling that way. We do this only for Allah. Right? Our feelings don't have that significance in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to His commands. Then he also redefined the whole concept of bid'ah at that time. So a lot of these people, they started innovating things in the religion. So, Ahmad Sirhindī, he said, bid'ah are of two types. We all know that, bid'ah hasana and bid'ah sayyah. There are two types of innovations in the religion. Things that are good, for example, taraweeh, right? That's a bid'ah. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, ni'mal bid'ah. How beautiful of an innovation it is that, he instituted taraweeh, and today the entire world prays taraweeh together. Right? So it's a great innovation. It's an innovation that got us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, this is a false understanding that people have that every bid'ah is going to lead you to dalala. That's not. We have so many examples. Compilation of the Quran is a bid'ah. Right? By definition, it's a bid'ah. It didn't happen at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? But again, who determines that? The ulama determined what is right and wrong. An average layman can't say, today I'm going to light a candle in the middle of the sajjada that I'm going to pray, and I'm going to let some of my chest burn with this candle. This is a new bid'ah, right? You can't do that. 2 minutes? Okay, inshallah. No, it's 8:23, right? 8:30? Inshallah. So after that, he redefined bid'ah, and then he said, if you do a particular thing as an innovation in the religion with the intention that it is good, and that particular good bid'ah is leading you away from your religion, you stop that action right away and you go back to the main source. You go back to the source of the sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, again, there's more that I have here, but again, we'll pass on. We already talked about two of the books that he wrote. One of the last books, again, there's an entire chapter of him fighting against the onslaught of the Shia ideology entering into the subcontinent. And he wrote a book called Raddur Rawafid. How do you defend against the philosophical onslaughts of Shia? But again, that's a completely separate discussion. In the end, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we benefit from these personalities, and we go home and we ponder, we read up, because 50 minutes or 1 hour is not enough to cover a life of person who lived 60 years. Many of these, our scholars of the past of such nature, they might require sometimes a full weekend course, and we still would hardly, you touch the tip of the iceberg, right? It's just so much there for us. That PhD that I was looking at is 280 pages. That's just one PhD on him. He has, I think, over 25, 26 different PhDs written. Like every person discovered something new, and he was given a PhD for it. Inshallah. So inshallah, next week we're going to do another particular luminary from Africa. So I'm going to tell you guys the name. We will be releasing a video about that shortly, inshallah.